I saw you on Happy Days, Leather Tuscadero. First couple of times I said, no, that's Suzi Quatro, man.
One remarkable lady broke new ground during the golden age of rock and roll, long before the Runaways and the Go-Go's were household names. As she rocked out to hits like Can the Can and Devilgate Drive in her signature black leather costume, Suzi Quatro personified the edgy 1970s vibe. After Happy Days came to a close, though, what became of this innovative rocker? Was her energy and enthusiasm on stage unchanged? On the other hand, did she give up the limelight for a more sedate existence after selling her leather jumpsuit? Come see the truth about what happened to Happy Days' Suzi Quatro with us. Suzi Quatro, whose given name is Susan K. Quatro, was born on June 3, 1950, into the pulsating musical energy of Detroit. Her life's work would be shaped by music. The musical progenitor Suzi Quatro came from a long line of accomplished musicians. Her dad, Art Quatro, was a jazz musician who also worked full-time at General Motors. He would listen to music whenever he wanted after work. Helen, her mother, had Hungarian ancestry, so she added a sense of global flavor. From an early age on, Suzi and her siblings were drawn to music, thanks to the abundance of instruments in their family. The thrilling performance of Elvis Presley on television had a life-altering effect on 6-year-old Suzi. She was still a little girl when the King's charisma and showmanship made an unforgettable impression on her. After that, Suzi joined her father's jazz trio and began performing publicly at the tender age of 7 or 8, depending on the source, when she displayed her budding skill for bongos and percussion. Not only did this formative experience make her feel at ease and confident in front of a crowd, but it also sparked her interest in music. How come Suzi Quatro, a rock music legend with indisputable ability, failed to enjoy the same level of success in her own America as she achieved on a global scale? When thinking about Suzi's professional path, particularly as a female rocker, how significant were her formative years with the Pleasure Seekers? To discover more, continue watching. Fostering several children during Suzi's upbringing allowed her to see diversity and fresh viewpoints firsthand. Being the 4th child of 5 in a loud and chaotic family meant that Suzi Quatro was surrounded by music from a young age. Suzi grew up with 4 siblings, 3 older sisters and a younger brother. Michael Quatro, one of her siblings, was also a skilled musician, so there were always instruments about the house. As she taught herself keyboards and bass guitar, her natural skill shone through. Suzi began performing her go-go dancing moves to the renowned music of Motown on local Detroit television when she was just 11 years old. Over the years, Suzi's musical approach was shaped by the soulful beats of Motown luminaries, such as The Temptations, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, and The Supremes. While Suzi is deeply influenced by American R&B, she has mentioned that British invasion artists such as the Rolling Stones and the Beatles have had a big influence. An important turning point in her formative years came in February 1964 when she saw the Beatles perform on The Ed Sullivan Show. As a result of the subsequent Beatlemania, Suzi saw the immense impact that rock and roll music could have. A decade later, she would become a trailblazer in that genre, which was previously dominated by men. Little did she realize it at the time. The Pleasure Seekers were an all-female garage rock band that Patty and 2 of her friends from the neighborhood formed in 1964, when Suzi was only 1 year old. At the time, the British invasion was at its peak, with the Rolling Stones and the Beatles at the forefront. Aspiring to emulate their heroes, Patty recognized a chance for an all-girl rock band to create a splash. Suzi Soul, real name Suzi Soul, became a member of the band 1 month after they formed in June 1964 and played bass and lead vocals. As Patty Pleasure, she was known. The Quatro sisters and their comrades, who were known as the Pleasure Seekers, were well known in the growing Detroit music scene. In their early days as an all-female band, the Pleasure Seekers gained fame for their edgy rock sound and assured performance in regional talent events and performances. They began performing regularly at well-known Michigan nightclubs in 1965. Suzi and Patty's elder sister Arlene became a member of the band in the spring of 1966, playing keyboards and having her husband Leo Fenn handle the financial side of things. The local profile of the Quatro sisters quickly rose despite the mistrust and chauvinism they encountered. Even though Chuck Berry was confronted by Suzi's father for inappropriate behavior on stage, the band still managed to make an appearance on Detroit television and open for notable performers that year. They progressed to regional tours and even scheduled a few brief trips abroad by 1968. In order to thrill their devoted fans, they relished the difficulties of touring and would often travel great miles in small vans. They began highlighting the thriving Detroit music scene with single releases and appearances on compilation albums after signing with Mercury Records in 1968. From cabaret performances to studio recordings, their dedication to their profession never wavered. With a name change to Cradle in 1969 and personnel changes, the band went through its fair share of transformations and progress throughout the years. Suzi, who was the band's anchor and lead singer for about 7 years, from 14 to 21 years old, weathered the storms well. The year 1971 marked the turning point for Suzi Quatro, as she chose to go out on her own. Suzi Quatro left her sister's band and ventured outside Detroit after sensing a personal and artistic desire for change. In 1971, a fortunate chance presented itself when Suzi's spectacular performance with her band Cradle was discovered by English record producer Mickey Most, who owned Rack Records. Most was intent on helping Suzi reach her star potential after being impressed by her strong bass guitar playing and powerful stage presence as lead singer. Most consented to see Suzi perform live that summer on Cradle's tour of the UK after being encouraged to do so by her brother Michael. Most did not squander any time convincing Suzi to join Rack Records and begin a solo career in London after being utterly captivated by her performance. The irresistible pull of this once-in-a-lifetime chance made Suzi abandon her loved ones and the comforts of Detroit. Suzi risked everything in October 1971 to go across the water and chase her aspirations of being a famous singer on a global scale. She made herself at home in the vibrant music culture of London. British pop artist Cliff Richard's go-to composer Peter William Ham was introduced to Suzi Quatro. Suzi boosted her popularity with the help of Ham when she auditioned and assembled a supporting band of accomplished British musicians. Because of this, she became firmly established in the music industry in 1972 when she toured the UK as the support act for the rock band Thin Lizzy. Performing in front of such enormous audiences was a huge boost to her career. Despite the earlier song's lack of success in most countries, Rolling Stone, released in 1972, shot to the top of the Portuguese charts and became a surprise smash. This early triumph in Portugal provided Suzi with a boost to her career. Suzi Quatro's ascent from Can the Can to world dominance, rocking across continents. The solo career of Suzi Quatro took off in 1973 when her single Can the Can became an enormous hit. Suzi could tell this song by British superstars Mike Chapman and Nicky Chin had big promise the moment she heard it. It was the ideal embodiment of the daring rock sound she was going for, a blend of incoherent lyrics, grittier guitar riffs, and furious percussion. The single Can the Can debuted in May 1973 and swiftly rose to the top of the UK charts by July. It also reached #1 in countries like Spain, South Africa, and Australia. In the US, it peaked at number 56, but the song's global success established Suzi as an unstoppable musical force. Also doing well was the companion album, Suzi Quatro, which peaked at number 32. Suzi, buoyed by her earlier triumph, wasted little time riding the wave of her success to more collaborations with Chapman and Chin, resulting in additional smash hits. One of these was Devilgate Drive, which became a UK chart topper. Top of the Pops saw Suzi play the song in her signature black leather costume while strumming her bass guitar, and the memories will never fade. Quatro, her second studio album, was released in 1974. It has songs such as Daytona Demon and 48 Crash, which was her first single to reach the UK Top 10. One of the most important parts of Suzi's career during her peak years was touring. She jumped at the chance to play thrilling rock music in front of huge crowds in late 1973 when she toured the United Kingdom with glam rock band Slade. Both parties benefited from the partnership. Slade's state-of-the-art PA system was free of charge, and Suzi got some publicity. In 1974, she continued her triumphant international career with a tour of Japan, where she became the first female rock singer to headline shows in major Japanese towns. Worldwide acclaim for Suzi catapulted her to new heights in 1976, when she won again in Australia. There, she played to sold-out crowds and cemented her position as a rock star in Australia. From their humble beginnings as a Detroit-based band, Suzi Quatro rose to become an unstoppable international sensation thanks to their relentless traveling schedule between 1973 and 1976. After her phenomenal musical career came to an end in the late 1970s, Suzi Quatro looked for fresh creative opportunities. Happy Days was Suzi's first role in television acting, and she played the role of Leather Tuscadero. Producer Gary Marshall saw a picture of her in his daughter's room and miraculously cast her without her having to audition. The show's younger sister of Fonzie's ex-lover, Pinky Tuscadero, Suzi gave a stylish, leather-clad rocker attitude as Leather. After Suzi's performance, Marshall pondered creating a spin-off series based on Leather Tuscadero, but she ultimately decided to stick with her musical origins. Her monthly performances on Happy Days introduced her to American viewers and displayed her acting chops, which helped her rise to the top of the extremely competitive U.S. market. In 1979, Suzi took her acting career to the next level with her role as Pleasure Cove in a BBC television drama. She returned home after a dazzling pop career takes a tumble in this show, playing the role of a singer. Notably, Suzi's acting and music careers were even more intertwined because her music was heavily included on the show's soundtrack. Playing the character of the feisty Annie Oakley in a 1986 West End musical was only one of Suzi's starring roles in musicals. Despite being an unconventional choice for the part, her energetic performance and superb singing voice garnered praise. Tallulah Who, a one-woman show about the iconic Tallulah Bankhead of the 1920s, was her 1991 comeback to the stage. It played for 1 month in England. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, Suzi started to include more pop, new wave, and adult contemporary elements into her songs. Stumblin' In, a duet with Smokey Chris Norman that she released in 1978, was one of her most popular songs in the United States. She seemed more mature in her approach, as seen by the muted tone. Also demonstrating diversity were songs with a parental theme, such as Mama's Boy, 1981. Albums like Suzi, 1979, allowed for a great deal of experimentation. It included the synth-heavy single She's in Love with You on the album, and other four-letter words. Songs like Tonight I Could Fall in Love, 1982, showcase her signature disco-funk vibe. As the decade progressed, Suzi demonstrated that she could go beyond her rock beginnings while maintaining her integrity. Suzi followed her creative muse instead of seeking ephemeral financial gains, even though her musical shape-shifting didn't necessarily lead to sustained chart success. Not only did Suzi Quatro write memorable songs, but she also broke new ground by challenging traditional gender roles in rock music. She portrayed a fierce, independent rock queen with a leather jacket and powerful bass lines. She scorned limiting femininity and expectations through her fearless attitude and expert bass guitar playing. Photo sessions featuring Suzi in her trademark black leather jumpsuit style were mandatory when she was initially promoting her 1973 blockbuster hit Can the Can. Her record label was not happy with this, since they believed she should project a more innocent and pop star image. Nevertheless, Suzi remained true to her rocker roots and emerged victorious, launching her now iconic leather-centric style. The leather garments worn by Suzi's idol, Elvis Presley, reflected her inner power and radiated femininity. The sci-fi flick Barbarella, she says, was another source of inspiration for her risky stage attire. In addition to her trademark leather jumpsuits, Suzi frequently appeared on stage and in record covers with a shag mullet haircut and black eye makeup. The result was an image that shouted defiance and rejection of traditional notions of what it means to be a woman. Suzi's reputation as a fearless bassist and frontwoman was also groundbreaking. She became famous across the world as the first female bass guitarist to break into the traditionally male-dominated rock music industry. Her skill as a bassist and singer shone through on infectiously funky lines in songs like Can the Can, and she and her bands nailed down rhythms at live performances. She has a rare talent in the male-dominated rock scene, the ability to move between playing complex sections and singing lead vocals with ease. Boldness was conveyed by Suzi's commanding stage presence and bass playing skills. It was clear from her achievements that women could rock as hard as males. She served as an inspiration to other females, empowering them to break free from limiting gender norms and rock out on bass. In 2018, as part of an exhibit on rock fashion, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame showcased Sue's famous jumpsuit and bass, recognizing her groundbreaking effect. Her impact is seen by several well-known female musicians who find inspiration in Sue's stage presence. Joan Jett, Tina Weymouth of Talking Heads, and the Runaways are among the artists that have cited her as an inspiration. The revolutionary style and musical prowess of Suzi Quatro did more than break the mold. They smashed it. By forging her own path according to her own terms, she helped make the traditionally male-dominated rock genre more accepting of female artists. Even in the modern day, that leather-clad heritage is felt. Behind the scenes, Suzi Quatro's personal life went through its fair share of love difficulties and losses, despite her tremendous professional success beginning in 1973. Suzi and her guitarist Len Tuckey started a marriage that would last for more than 15 years when they tied the knot in 1976. In the course of their musical collaborations, which included Len's contributions to singles like Can the Can, their friendship flourished. They started a family and eventually bought a beautiful manor house in Essex, England, where they brought up their kids, Richard and Laura Leonard. In order to fully immerse herself in parenthood and the joys of being a stay-at-home mom, Suzi took a little break from her music career. But behind the surface, tensions were building as Suzi and Len's career and personal goals drove them in opposite ways. In contrast to Suzi's focus on her family, Len was driven to keep following his musical dreams. In the late 1980s, Suzi's love for rock music was reawakened, and she felt compelled to return to the stage. Unfortunately, Len's marriage was already struggling before her career came roaring back, and she longed for more time at home with her husband. Their decision to split ways amicably in 1992 was prompted by the widening gap between their musical and familial obligations, despite their attempts to reconcile via counseling. Suzi and Len continued to co-parent their children respectfully and civilly, even after their personal relationship ended. Suzi wed Rainer Haas, a German concert organizer, the following year after they had met backstage during a performance in 1986. They often had a long-distance relationship because Haas lived in Hamburg, Germany, while Suzi mostly lived in England. As Suzi's popularity and record sales began to decline, she also got remarried. Her professional career came to a standstill in the 90s, although she continued to enjoy great success performing live abroad. Her love for music remained constant through thick and thin. Richard, who was just 8 years old when Suzi got a divorce, felt the effects of it all. The breakup of his parents' marriage affected him deeply, and he grew defiant as a teenager. As a mom, this was a major source of worry for Suzi. Fortunately, Richard grew up and mended his connection with Suzi after a rough patch. After her fame began to soar, Suzi felt she could no longer devote the same amount of time to her children. A typical battle for renowned performers, She attempted to balance her work and family, but she felt that she fell short at times in both. In spite of the fact that she made several blunders, she tried her best. At 2006, Suzi was overjoyed when her daughter Laura and grandchild came back to live with her at the Manor House in Essex. But when they finally left again a few years later, Suzi admitted she struggled with empty nest loneliness. While the kids became more self-reliant, Suzi Quatro went through the highs and lows of celebrity and personal hardship. She overcame obstacles by staying true to herself, her music, and her family. Suzi Quatro's popularity and tireless traveling schedule internationally remained robust, even after her hit-making peak waned by the late 1980s. This was particularly the case in Japan, Australia, and Europe, where she had a loyal fan base. Even though the 1990s were a barren decade for chart success, the UK continued to be a solid hold for the artist after their 1973 meteoric rise to stardom there. Truly, Britain took Suzi in as their own. Popular rock music radio shows that she hosted for the BBC in the late 1980s were her forte. From Germany to Spain, Suzi often traveled Europe as a headliner and performer at festivals. In 2010, she shared the stage with Paul McCartney at the Isle of Wight and other large British festivals. Generations were moved by her song. Even after her first Japanese concerts in 1974, the country remained devoted. Suzi had a unique connection with her Japanese audience and returned for concerts there on many occasions. Their unwavering loyalty made her feel small. After the United Kingdom, Australia became one of Suzi's most powerful territories. In 1976, she went on a phenomenally successful tour of Australia that solidified her position and caused her popularity to skyrocket. She was selling out venues in Australia far into the 1990s. Suzi was able to keep doing what she loved most, performing live rock and roll, by touring the world. She felt active and young because of all the people and all the activity. Although the CDs were not successful, the concerts allowed the artists to express themselves and connect with their followers. Even though album sales fell, touring helped Suzi maintain financial security. She kept going strong far into her 60s and 70s, when most people would have retired, as a tireless worker in the music industry, traveling countries year after year. Her relentless schedule earned her a great deal of admiration. Suzi Quatro's career is puzzling in part because she was more famous and successful outside of the United States than at home. Many things came together to form this mysterious U.S. factor. Born in Detroit during the height of the rock era, Suzi appeared doomed to stardom in the United States. Nevertheless, she departed for England, where she achieved tremendous success after experiencing local growth with her sister's band, the Pleasure Seekers. But American audiences were hard to come by. The United States may be the biggest music market in the world, yet mainstream success was elusive for early singles like Can the Can. Her edgy persona and infectious glam rock songs were criticized for being overly dramatic. Although portraying Leather Tuscadero on Happy Days brought Suzi some fame, she turned down spin-off opportunities in order to focus on her singing career. Even while subsequent hits like Stumbling In had some radio play in the US, they were never really famous in their own country. The time and location of Suzi's trip to the United States probably worked against her. Maybe she could have launched with the full support of US labels and promoters if she had remained in the US for a little longer before going overseas. On top of that, Suzi's glam rock peak in the early 1970s was slightly after the American rock wave peaked. The punk disco 70s and the psychedelic 60s were right there, sandwiching her. Although glam rock was widely accepted in Britain, cultural differences made it difficult for people to relate. While Suzi still has deep roots in Detroit, she has built a loyal American fan base via her touring career. Nothing ever came of her turning that into widespread recognition. Once Suzi Quatro's career peaked in the 1970s, it slowed down for a little. However, she made a triumphant return in the 1990s and 2000s, reviving her music career. During this time, she finally received the credit she deserved for her groundbreaking early career and her status as a female rocker. Suzi resumed releasing studio albums in the early 1990s, following a recording sabbatical in the late 80s. By delving into more serious topics, she hoped to reassert her artistic credibility. Notable works include the critically acclaimed 1992 album Oh Suzi Q and the long-running 1993 album What Goes Around. By releasing new music alongside previously unreleased songs on 1998's Unreleased Emotion, she proved she was more than simply a 70s fad and a lasting talent. After performing her first U.S. gig in years in 1991, Suzi was re-energized and continued to write and record. She made a triumphant return in 2006 with the release of Back to the Drive-In, which became her first #1 album in decades and topped the rock rankings on Amazon. After that, Suzi Quatro gained widespread renown when a documentary chronicling her revolutionary career was produced in 2007, and BBC R2 named her one of the queens of British music. Along with other trailblazers like Dusty Springfield, she was recognized in this way. In the same year, Suzi took fans on a journey through her rock and roll career with the publication of her book, Unzipped. The Isle of Man also had the good fortune to include her on its postage stamp. The Michigan Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame elected Suzi as an inductee in 2010 by public voting. Both the Detroit local recognition and the Hungarian Prize for Musical Excellence had significant value for her. Suzi Quatro is known as the godmother of rock for her fearless strides as a female bassist in the 1970s rock scene, while dressed in leather. It would be impossible to exaggerate Suzi Quatro's influence on other female artists, or the extent to which she helped remove obstacles faced by female rock performers. She broke barriers for women in the music industry by demonstrating that they could be successful as bassists, stage presence, and band leaders, among other accomplishments. Joan Jett, Debbie Harry, Tina Weymouth, KT Tunstall, Debbie Harry of Bikini Kill, and Kathleen Hanna are just a few of the many notable female artists whose work has been impacted by her. Suzi was instrumental in igniting the female punk wave movement in the late 70s and beyond by featuring women rocking out. Even outside of the world of professional musicians, Suzi has made an impression. She inspired regular girls and women to follow their dreams of becoming musicians without fear of ridicule or rejection, and she became an icon for their emancipation. Can the Can and Devil Gate Drive are only two of her anthems that gave her listeners the courage to be themselves by encouraging them to believe in themselves and their abilities. Ultimately, Suzi Quatro has left behind a legacy of independence and strength, encouraging countless others to break barriers and follow their passions, gender or no gender. Women could hold their own instrumentally with males, as Suzi's aggressive bass playing demonstrated. Not only did Suzi Quatro's dogged pursuit of female rock stardom accelerate her own career, but it also prepared the way for other influential women of the 80s, such Pat Benatar, Debbie Harry, Stevie Nicks, and the Go-Go's. She was an inspiration to other strong female pop stars like Madonna, with her daring stage attire and her rock and roll music. Godmother of Rock was the moniker bestowed upon Suzi because of the enormous influence she had as a powerful female role model in the music industry, even though there had been previous big women's liberation movements. By playing her bass guitar with conviction, she set an example for the group. Suzi overcame sexism in the 1970s industry and adapted to changing cultural norms so that she could continue to have an impact. Her quick recovery from COVID-19 in late 2020, although being 70 years old, is evidence of her perseverance. She has a strong work ethic that she inherited from her working-class family in Detroit, and she is constantly looking forward to the next chance, record, or performance. Looking back on her career, she is proud of how she did things her own way, putting an emphasis on creativity rather than chart success. She continues to inspire people all across the world with her unfaltering dedication and her love of music. At an age when most people think about retiring, she still rocks out for the love of rock. This unquenchable fire within Suzi Quatro for her art is what keeps her going, and she continues to forge her own unique path no matter what. She is an icon because of her perseverance. Rock star Suzi Quatro has spoken about how she believed her sister abandoned her. As mentioned earlier, the 72-year-old singer of The Wild One was a member of the all-female band The Pleasure Seekers with her 74-year-old sister Patty. After leaving to pursue a solo career in Britain, the singer returned to her hometown of Detroit and was shocked to discover that her sister had made outfits out of the clothes she had left in their old bedroom. "There is a gap between reality and perception," she told the Mail on Sunday, December 12, 2023, adding that it's a significant issue for her. Also, the untamed singer said that she's had a lot of experiences and circumstances throughout the years, and while she knows the truth about how she felt about them, she's also aware that everyone has their own unique perspective. While discussing her life as a Detroit adolescent, Suzi brought up her 2007 book, Unzipped. In it, she and her elder sister Patty were members of the all-female rock band, The Pleasure Seekers. Patty was a member of the American girl group Fanny, but she never achieved the fame she had hoped for, whereas Suzi said that she was chosen for a solo career in the UK. Much obliged for your time. Before you go, see another one of our entertaining videos and subscribe to our channel.